A 27-ton steel needle dangled over Manhattan. 860 feet below, architect William Van Allen stood on the sidewalk, staring upward, his stomach tightening with every sway of the cable. If it snapped, 54,000 pounds of metal would punch through 70 stories of unfinished structure and explode onto Lexington Avenue. Rumors had been circulating for weeks. A flagpole, people whispered. Some kind of ornament. This was no flagpole. Workers began pulling. The first section rose slowly through an opening in the building's dome, then vanished into the 66th floor. The second followed, then the third, then the fourth. 90 minutes later, rivets screamed into place and the pieces fused into a single spear of steel. A 1-100-80-5-foot spire now pierced the clouds. The Chrysler Building had just become the tallest structure ever, erected by human beings, higher than the Great Pyramid, taller than the Eiffel Tower, 1,046 feet of brick, steel, and one man's obsession. 24 hours later, the stock market collapsed. This is the story of a railroad mechanic from Kansas who built that tower not for a corporation, not for shareholders, but for himself, for his children, for legacy. A man who demanded that his bathroom sit higher than any other in Manhattan so that, as one observer noted, he could look down on Henry Ford and the rest of the world. Walter Percy Chrysler was born on April 2, 1875, in Wamego, Kansas. His father, Henry, drove locomotives for the Kansas Pacific Railroad. His mother, Anna Marie, ran the household while her husband worked the rails. When Walter was 3, the family moved west to Ellis, a frontier town surrounded by endless prairie. The rail yard dominated life there. Steam whistles echoed across the flatlands. Coal smoke drifted through the streets. Henry Chrysler had fought in the Civil War. He was gentle but firm, and he wanted his son to go to college. Walter had other ideas. At 15, he quit school. Within a year, he was hauling groceries 16 hours a day for $10 a month. He wanted grease under his fingernails, not books in his hands. His father resisted. Walter persisted. At 17, he convinced supervisors at the Union Pacific Railroad to take him on as an apprentice mechanic. The pay was 10 cents an hour. He accepted instantly. For the next 20 years, he drifted across the American West, Colorado, Wyoming, Texas, Iowa, working in roundhouses, rebuilding engines, diagnosing failures others could not explain. Valve timing became his specialty. Foreman, superintendent, division master mechanic. By his early 30s, he had reached the top of his trade, managing operations for the American Locomotive Company in Pittsburgh at a salary of $8,000 a year. Then came the automobile show. In 1908, Chrysler wandered through the Chicago Auto Show. He had never driven a car. He had never owned one. On the floor sat a cream-colored locomobile. $5,000. Nearly his entire annual income. He bought it anyways, $700 down, the rest borrowed with a colleague's signature. The car arrived at his house in Owine, Iowa. He did not drive it. Instead, he pushed it into his barn and dismantled it. Every bolt, every valve, every gear. He rebuilt it, then took it apart again, and again. Some said he disassembled the machine dozens of times before ever turning the ignition. Walter Chrysler didn't want transportation. He wanted comprehension. 3 years later, in 1911, a banker named James Starrow summoned him for a meeting. Had he ever thought about working in automobiles? Chrysler admitted the idea had consumed him since Chicago. Starrow arranged a meeting with Charles Nash of Buick. There was a problem. The job paid $6,000 a year. Chrysler was making $12,000. He accepted without hesitation. At 36, he walked away from railroads forever. Within 5 years, he would make Buick, General Motors' most profitable division. Within 15, he would found his own company. Within 20, he would reshape the New York skyline. But it began with a boy who refused college and took apart a car before learning to drive. Billy Durant, leaned across his desk, smiling. He always smiled. Walter Chrysler did not. Durant had just offered him $500,000 a year to stay at Buickin. Astronomical sum. But there was a catch. Durant wanted control. He always did. The two men had fought for years. Chrysler demanded efficiency. Durant believed in growth at any price. When Chrysler proposed outsourcing frames to save $2 million annually, Durant announced a $6 million factory. When Chrysler reorganized operations, Durant sold a profitable dealership without telling him. By fall of 1919, Chrysler was done. He told Alfred Sloan he wanted out. Durant bought his stock for $10 million. 8 years earlier he'd taken a pay cut to enter automobiles. Now he was among the richest men in America. He could have retired. Instead, he took over the failing Willys Overland Company for $1 million a year. 2 years later, denied full authority, he left. Then came Maxwell Motor Company. It was drowning $30-2 million in debt, 26,000 unsold cars rusting in yards nationwide. Friends said he was reckless. He saw potential. Factories, dealers, workers. He hired 3 engineers, Fred Zidor, Owen Skelton, Carl Breer. They produced the Chrysler 6, hydraulic brakes, high compression, under $2,000, 32,000 sold in a year. In 1925, Chrysler Corporation was born. 3 years later, he bought Dodge for $170 million, launched Plymouth and DeSoto, and became Times Man of the Year. Still, factories fade. Walter Chrysler wanted permanence, stone, steel, sky. The Chrysler Building was never meant to bear his name. The site belonged to Cooper Union and was leased to developer William Reynolds, who hired Van Olen for a 40-story tower. Glass corners, a glowing dome, Art Deco in embryo. Ground was broken in 1928. Then Reynolds ran out of money. On October 15th, Chrysler bought everything, then demolished it. He would start over. Taller steel eagles perched on the 61st floor, giant replicas of hood ornaments. Radiator caps jutted from lower setbacks. Hubcaps circled the 30th. The building became advertisement and monument. Chrysler paid $14 million from his own pocket. Krupp stainless steel crowned the spire. Workers cut 69 feet into schist 2 bedrock. Steel rose 4 stories a week. Not one man died. He demanded safety. He demanded speed. Van Olen and H. Craig Severance had once been partners. Now they were rivals. Severance's tower at 40 Wall Street climbed. Van Olen revised upward. Severance countered. Then Van Olen hid a weapon inside the building itself, a secret spire. In October 1929, it emerged, 1,046 feet. Severance protested. No one listened. Men climbed into fog before dawn. Fox cameras captured them straddling beams. Audiences gasped. But Chrysler had ordered nets, rails, medical staff. Speed through discipline. Height through planning. Steel through will. The tower rose not by luck but by obsession. A bulletin board near the elevators posted daily safety reports. The job site operated like one of Chrysler's assembly plants turned vertical. Materials arrived only when needed. Cranes swung beams into place before the concrete beneath them had fully cured. Bricklayers advanced behind steelworkers in a steady upward surge, each trade occupying a different altitude. The engineering firm Ralph Squire & Sons choreographed the entire ballet. Nothing stalled. Nothing sat idle. The numbers revealed the scale. More than 20,900 tons of structural steel were lifted skyward. Nearly 392,000 rivets were heated until glowing red and hammered into place. Almost 4 million bricks were laid by hand to form walls that carried no weight at all. More than 3,800 windows were mounted into frames of German stainless steel. 3,000 men did the work. For a project this high, Casualties were expected, dozens at least. When it ended, not one of those 3,000 had died. Chrysler praised the achievement publicly. Privately, he had assumed it from the beginning. His fortune had been built on safer factories and faster systems. The Chrysler Building was simply another plan, tonally vertical, producing something more permanent than automobiles. By autumn, the masonry skin was closing around the completed steel skeleton. Bricklayers now worked downward from the crown while interior crews prepared the lower floors for tenants. The opening was only months away, yet the city still did not know how tall the tower truly was. Hidden inside the dome, waiting for the right instant, a final device lay concealed. No one outside the project suspected it existed. While newspapers charted the race floor by floor, Van Olen labored on something he never announced. Permits were filed discreetly. Steel orders went through without publicity. Unmarked deliveries arrived at the site and vanished into the building's core. The fire shaft at the Chrysler Center ran upward like a hollow spine through all 77 stories. Ordinarily, such shafts carried stairs and utilities. Van Olen turned this one into camouflage. Inside it, workers began assembling a steel spear. He called it the Vertex. The structure consisted of lattice framing 4 corner angles, tied together with diagonal struts. When finished, it would rise 185 feet and weigh 27 tons. It could not be lifted in one piece. It could not be assembled openly on the roof. Secrecy was essential, and the shaft provided it. Sections of the spire were hoisted to the 65th floor and joined together inside the building where no one could glimpse them. Scaffolding enveloped the dome, supposedly to allow workers to finish the stainless steel exterior. In truth, it concealed the real operation. Even the riveters were largely unaware of what they were building. Blueprints showed dimensions, not intent. Only when the segments began to form their final outline did the shape become obvious. Only then did they understand. They were forging a weapon in a war for altitude. Van Alen's cousin, William Edwin Squire, served as structural engineer. He calculated stresses and cable loads, determining whether 27 tons could be hoisted through the narrow aperture at the crown. On paper, the answer was yes. The equations did not account for gusting wind, mechanical failure, or the 1,000 ways a plan could unravel 860 feet above the pavement. Whispers drifted downtown. Severance heard that Van Olen had a trick hidden inside his tower, that the Chrysler Building would somehow grow taller than announced. No one could describe how. No one had proof. Severance dismissed it and focused on his own project. At 927 feet, he was convinced victory was secure. By mid-October, the concealed spire was complete. It waited inside the shaft like a blade in its sheath. Van Olen alerted no one. No warning. No chance for a counterstrike. The papers would learn only after the fact. Van Olen felt ill. He stood blocks away, unable to watch directly and unable to turn aside. His stomach twisted. His head throbbed. 860 feet overhead. Workers balanced on timber platforms encircling the dome, preparing for something no one had ever attempted. His mind raced. The cables could snap, sending 27 tons of steel plummeting through 70 floors. The derrick might fail to raise the sections high enough. A sudden gust could tip the needle outward and drop it onto Lexington Avenue during rush hour. Squire had signed off on the math. Possible, he had said. Possible was not comforting. Rumors had spread for days. Workers at 40 Wall Street noticed a derrick climbing above the Chrysler Dome. Official statements claimed it was for a flagpole. No one believed that. The bottom section rose first. A derrick hauled it up the building's flank, cables taut, then eased it through the opening at the crown until it seated at the 66th floor. Men guided it into place. Then came the second piece, then the third, then the fourth. Each segment crept upward, swung over the dome, and descended into the void, where riveters locked it to the one below. The needle lengthened. The building climbed. What astonished everyone involved was the speed. The same coordination that had erected 4 floors a week now assembled a skyscraper's crown in under 2 hours. When the final rivet went in, the Chrysler Building stood 1,046 feet above the sidewalk. Walter Chrysler watched from across the street. Van Ollen finally exhaled. No press had been invited. No cameras waited. No headlines prepared. Van Ollen wanted the triumph sealed before anyone could respond. Severance would learn only after the spire was immovable. The Herald Tribune, which had chronicled construction almost daily, did not mention the feat until days later. By then the scaffolding still cloaked the crown. The shining spear would not be revealed until spring, but the figures were fixed. Chrysler 1,046 feet, Eiffel Tower 986, Woolworth 792, 40, Wall Street 927. The race was over. The next morning, the stock market began to fall. When the scaffolding came down in the spring of 1930, New York had never seen anything like it. 7 radiating arches stepped backward in terraces. Triangular windows punctured every surface, arranged in patterns that flared outward like sun rays. Van Ollen meant the building to look as though it strained upward even while standing still. The metal skin covering those arches was unprecedented Narosta steel, an alloy rich in chromium and nickel, manufactured in Germany. It resisted corrosion and washed clean in rain. Unlike bronze or copper, it would never darken. It would shine for decades. Below the crown, automotive symbolism erupted from every setback. On the 61st floor, stainless steel eagles thrust from the corners, streamlined in the Art Deco style suggesting motion rather than heraldry. At the 31st, winged radiator caps from 1929 Chrysler cars became architectural ornaments. This was not a temple or a bank. It was a monument to industry. Le Corbusier visited and called it hot jazz in stone and steel. Some critics applauded, others scoffed. Van Ollen ignored them. So did Chrysler. The exterior was finished. Now came the inside. Visitors entering from Lexington Avenue stepped into a lobby equal to the spectacle above. Walls glowed with crimson Moroccan marble streaked in white. Amber onyx flanked the elevators. Granite floors formed geometric patterns beneath bronze-framed windows. Overhead stretched the largest mural in the world. Edward Trumbull's transport and human endeavor covered nearly 8,000 square feet. Airplanes banking, ships steaming, factory lines running in motion. The Chrysler Building appeared inside its own ceiling. The elevator doors were masterpieces. Lotus motifs formed from brass and exotic woods, Japanese ash, English harewood, Asian walnut. 32 elevators served the tower. No 2 interiors matched. Yet the most exclusive space lay 66 floors up. The Cloud Club opened in July 1934. 300 elite members. Texaco had demanded it when leasing 14 floors. Chrysler exceeded expectations. One level evoked Tudor England. Another shimmered with futurism granite columns. Vaulted ceilings painted with drifting clouds. A Manhattan panorama glowing along the north wall. Chrysler kept a private suite there. Texaco executives had their own. Amenities included a barbershop, humidor, lockers for bootleg liquor, and a ticker room. It was a place for deals, not dancing. It closed in 1979. In January 1931, Van Ollen attended the Beaux-Arts ball, dressed as his own building. Patent leather boots, a sunburst crown headdress, wood inlays matching the elevators. He dominated the evening. It was his last public triumph. He had never signed a contract. When he invoiced Chrysler for $840,000, 6% of construction Chrysler refused. Van Ollen sued. He won. The lawsuit ruined him. Clients vanished. Depression froze construction. He never built another major tower. He died in 1954. The building outlived him. The Empire State Building opened in May 1931. Reclaiming the height record with a mooring mast no airship ever used. Chrysler's reign lasted 11 months. Walter Chrysler died in 1940. The building declined. Ownership changed. Maintenance faltered. By the 1970s, it was nearly empty. Restorations followed. Lights finally illuminated the crown. The spire gleamed again. Investors came and went. Critics changed their minds. What Mumford once dismissed became beloved. The Chrysler Building lost the height contest. It won something rarer, affection. Nearly a century later, it still dissolves into the sky above Lexington Avenue exactly as its architect intended.